right, today we are in Acts chapter 20, and the passage of scripture was really 1 through 12, but I'm going to go ahead and read to you from 7 to 12. Paul is getting ready to leave the area, and before he leaves, he kind of calls everyone together, does a speech, it says even at midnight, so a late meeting, a gathering. And during this meeting, one of the men falls asleep and passes away. Paul has the opportunity then to really do a miracle and raise him from the dead. So let's go ahead and read this. Eutychus raised from the dead. On the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Paul talked with them, intending to depart on the next day, and he prolonged his speech until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where they were gathered, and a young man named Eutychus, sitting at the window, sank into a deep sleep as Paul talked still longer. And being overcome by sleep, he fell down from the third-story window and was taken up dead. But Paul went down and bent over him, and taking him in his arms, said, "Do not be alarmed, for his life is in him." And when Paul had gone up and had broken bread and eat, he conversed with them for a long while until daybreak, and so departed. And they took the youth away alive, and were not a little comforted. All right, so we're going to go about this a little bit differently than normal. So I already have part of my page done. I'm just going to be using some really basic script. I think there's all sorts of things you could do for this inside picture, but we're actually going to be doing something really creative with tip-ins on this project. We're going to be making basically a window that opens up. And so what you put behind that window is really however you want to display the visual for this particular passage. I just went ahead and kept with that one-liner there, "Do not be alarmed, for his life is in him," and that is when Paul raises him from the dead and shows them the power that is in him because of Christ. And so anyway, I wanted to just kind of give you the idea for this, and then I wanted to briefly talk about the idea of painting a night sky. I thought because the window, I just picture this person, falling asleep on the windowsill in the depths of night. We know that they prolonged the speech until midnight. So we're talking early hours of the morning, and how tired this man must have been as he fell asleep. And so I want to talk about this because one of the things that we tend to do when we're thinking it's a night sky, so it's black. But we really have to be careful when we're painting with black, not to get, number one, too dull, and number two, so heavy with the black. So I may start with a little bit of a black. I can even go into this gray to get started. But what I'm going to do is actually mix this with some blues and even some purple. So I'm going to have kind of a blue tone here, and I'm going to use this spot over here. I always leave my color mixes from past projects. You'll see that my palette is very dirty. I'm sure some artists have beautiful clean palettes. I never do, because I like to just leave what I've been working with over here. So if you mix a little purple with your blue, you'll get kind of that darker, richer tone of purple, and that is something that can really work for you as well. So I want to start with those tones, and to be honest with you, we could even go into more of like a tealy green. You can definitely kind of pull in some green tones as well. I think pulling in some of those colorful tones underneath where you may have the darker sky later, it just gives it something to look at, a little bit interesting. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and kind of add in some of those very, very loose pieces, and I'm going to avoid very much so the areas around my words. I've got a nice piece of paper here underneath, so I'm going to go ahead and just slowly add some color in, and I'm just going to work up to a darker version. And what you'll see me doing is kind of placing colors here and there, so that and this is very watered down. These would be considered like washes of color, and that way you can really continuously move them, and kind of, I like to, if I place a color, place another color, then I kind of go in between there and just kind of do a nice blend. And this will start to build up this idea that there's a dark sky behind it. So you can see how using some of those purples and gray blues and even that darker green will give us like a little bit more than just black. If we were to go straight to the black on this, ooh, it could be dangerous, and it could be a little bit displeasing in the sense of just being kind of boring, to be honest with you, a little dull. So this helps to add a little flair to it. Now you're going to continue to kind of work with this. You want to let it dry. We've got a really watery washes on this, so you just have to be careful not to tinker too much. But you can also decide if you want to paint smoothly. I like to usually give rough edges to things that I'm working on. I could get in here probably a little bit in between my words and break those up a little bit, but that's totally up to you. You could also, instead of using that, I have a flat brush here I was working with, you could also work with a round brush and have a little bit of softer, just a little more delicate movements and marks with your brush strokes, and just kind of see what feels good and what feels like it makes you feel confident. You want to have some confidence when you're painting especially. All right, so once your page is dry and you feel like you have the amount of darkness that you'd like on there, of course, I don't like to go, I like to try to keep as much of my work visible so that I can go back and read the words. I'm not against covering pages, and I think that's really a personal response, but for me, I really do in most cases try to keep some sort of a transparency so that I can read through or go back and just at least be able to see what I was doing. So I have a gold pen. I also have a white paint pen. This is Paint Touch. It happens to be a really good permanent opaque white. I know that it is so tricky to find white pens. This is one that's more of a marker pen by Sakura, and I do highly recommend this pen as well. I'm almost out of this, but I'm going to try to work with it here a little bit. I also have these really cool liquid pearls, which are kind of almost like a puffy paint. Let me try to see if I can get some of this out here. So, you can add a little bit of texture this way, and what I was picturing was just kind of putting in kind of like that starry night. So these might be fun just to add a little bit of texture to the paper as well. And they've got a nice shimmer to them. You can do all sorts of really great stuff with this. Paint them or just you leave them in dots. And it's the same with this little pen here. I'm going to do a couple of larger stars with my gold just for fun. Kind of giving up a little bit of that starry night feel. So whatever works for you. I'm kind of just being whimsical with this. Not anything super reality, just given the implication of that night sky that we would have known was happening during this little chit chat. It's funny to me when I hear, he started at midnight. He was gonna leave, but he decided to stay. That sounds like something that I would do with my girlfriends. Like, we're gonna talk, but I really have to get going in the morning. Oh, well, never mind. It's the morning. we're still talking. I just thought that's kind of a funny situation here. But what an opportunity that Paul had to really witness to these men that he was speaking to. Guys, trick right here. So I'm a little bit worried about the quality of the paint coming out. So what I'm going to do here is actually get this flowing so that I can see that there is a little pile here. I don't want that blob ever on my paper. So I just go ahead and kind of dip into it from that way and know that I've got material. This is mostly just at the end. If I was like at the beginning of this pen, I would be a little more brave to use it that way, but I get a little bit nervous, so I always just put it on a piece of paper and then kind of dip back into it, so that's gonna work. So just some little clusters of stars here and there. But yeah, what I was saying is just such an awesome opportunity for Paul to really show them the power of Christ that was in him, and just being able to use that opportunity as a witness to these men before he left, and saying, God is capable of great things. And all through, as we read through Matthew, we just heard parable after parable of all of the things that God did, that Jesus did when he was on earth. And what an amazing time to have been there and to be witnessing these miracles at such a pace. And he was really setting the tone for who he was. He wasn't messing around, was he? All right, so that's kind of what I'm going to just kind of finish with that for this page. I think this would be nice. I should have said this before. Right at the tail end of my sky painting, I went ahead with like the lightest amount of gray just to tone down the starkness of my page where those words were, to kind of soften that up a bit. But I think this would be a great place for you to go back in here, either with the gold or the white, fill in, or another color of some kind, and fill in those little pieces of letters. Again, all of that depends on what you decide to do for your words, or in fact, you might be wanting to put a picture. So, all right, before I put my Bible aside, what I'm going to do here, we're going to be working with some paper, and I have pre-cut this paper. I'm going to use this side just because I've got some wet paint there, to trim up 2 pieces that are just about the right size to fit here together in the middle. I don't want them to come super close to the edges here, so you can see I've left a tiny bit of white there. And then I also don't want them to fall over too much on the sides. I know these could kind of squeeze in there, but I want them to stay kind of on this main section. The reason for that is we're going to create 2 windows that are tip-ins, and in order to do a tip-in, we're going to want this to be attached here on the edges so that this can open and close, and this can open and close. So I'm going to go ahead and put my Bible aside, and then we'll talk about how to create some windows. Okay, so to create our windows, I simply have 2 pieces of paper that I had pre-cut to fit the size of my Bible page. I also am going to want some vellum. So you may not need both of these, but maybe we will. We might need them. We're going to use this as kind of the glass of our window. And so what we're going to start with doing is just taking these and flipping them over and using a ruler to kind of map out where we want our window panes to be. Typically, we're just going to do like old school window pane. I'm going to put like 4 cut triangles into this. So we're going to go ahead with a ruler and just kind of measure these out and draw them on. So I'll go ahead and do a time lapse so you can see how I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm thinking maybe I'm just going to leave like a 1/2 inch maybe. I'm not going to worry about being too perfect, but I'll go ahead and get this sketched out and you guys can take a peek at how I'm doing that. Okay, so once you have your window panes drawn out and just as even as you can, of course you can take the time to measure and be precise. I am not for the sake of this video, but I've got them pretty close, I think, to what they need to be. Then I'm going to just go ahead and use an X-Acto blade to cut out just those inside rectangles, and you will see that I am very imperfect here as well with that cutting. That's all right. So we'll go ahead and cut out those insides, and then what we're going to do is use the vellum attached to the back and kind of lay that over as a layer, and that's going to go ahead and cover up those window panes so that we don't see just straight through to the words, but we have a little bit of a foggy, transparent, but a little bit of a foggy view to the back. And I think that's going to give us a really cool effect to show like windows opening up and then opening up to that passage that gives us a lot of hope. Let's see if we can get one more here. I'm certainly not taking the type of time that I should be, but I want to get this set here for you so you kind of get the idea. And then, like I said, once this is done here, we've got that nice window pane. And what we're going to do is then get some vellum, and it doesn't have to be cut the exact same size. I mean, you can go right to the edge if you want to, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do this and just cut it here. It's kind of a trick here. If you undercompensate, then you can just trim it off the edge and then move it, shift it into place. There we go. There we go. And then I can go ahead and shift this over. Got a little cut there. Make sure that that lines up so that gives you kind of a frosted look. And then I'm just using my little Zig glue pen here. I think this is going to be the easiest route to just get some glue on there. And I'll let those windows sit. before I attach them to my Bible and just give them some time to dry. And then you'll be all set for those windows. So let's go ahead and attach this. Just like that. Of course, if you wanted to have something a little more permanent behind there, closed in, but I think that gives a really cool look. It's like you can see through it, but not 100%. And I think that's going to look really cool. Let's see how it's going to look here with it being on the Bible. So here's our page. We'll go ahead and lay this over. So it's like it covers it enough, but it does not, it doesn't make it so bare, but it definitely, you can see through it just like you would through the window, and then you'll be able to tip these open like this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get us on a time lapse. Go ahead and assemble this together. Of course, we're going to just be using, I've got some great black and gold. I even have some washi tape that has some stars on it. I thought that would be fun for this page as well. So when we do the washi tape, before I go on to the time lapse of finishing this, what my trick here is with applying washi tape is actually to flip the page over to the side I do not want, but that I'm going to be attaching to. And so my trick is always to attach it to the back side first. And when we do that, we want to actually, and I probably should have trimmed these edges so that they were nice, but I want to do this so that it's half on the page and half off the page, so that when I flip it over, I can see part of the tape there, and I'll be able to then add this on right where I want it, something like this, right to the edge, and then just fold my washi tape over. Of course, you want to do that small chunk so you don't get the wrinkles. And then I've got that tip in that'll be able to tip open and close. So a little bit of trim work, and I'll get the other one done, and then we'll be able to see this page put all together.